Today we'll be chatting about education in crypto, and we got Dom and Phil here from EasyA. You guys have the mission to onboard the next billion developers to Web3 over the next decade. I know you guys do hackathons. I know you have the app.
EasyA is a mobile app that allows anybody at the push of a few buttons to start learning about Web3.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Teach Me DeFi. Hi guys, thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having us on.
Same. Well, nice. I'm just excited to talk about this topic, it's something dear to us. And I had a quick look at some of the things you say about EasyA, and I found this interesting, which said you guys have the mission to onboard the next billion developers to Web3 over the next decade. Now tell me why that's important and what you're doing to make this happen.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I guess to preface it all, I think that one of the biggest problems that we've had so far in Web3 is this critical onboarding problem. And everybody talks about it a lot. It's hard for users to get involved. It's hard for developers to get onboarded as well. And at the end of the day, if we don't have developers building great products, then we're not going to have the next billion or even multiple billion of users. We probably won't even have another 10 million or 100 million users because it's just so difficult. And we probably reached the limit of those early adopters who are really just going to put up with all of that friction. So I think that one of the things that actually Jeff Bezos put really nicely is before him, and the reason he was able to build Amazon is because before him, basically all of the modems, the internet was set up. There was the postal service, the Royal Mail or Deutsche Post, wherever you are. And all of those things enabled him to build Amazon pretty much just in an office with a couple of other people, right? He didn't have to build a new postal network. He didn't have to build the internet. He didn't have to build any of that stuff. So that's really what we want to do. We want to make it easy. We want to build those rails for developers to come into the space. And that's where it all comes down to easy. And that's the way that we're going to be able to bring a billion more people, a billion more developers into Web3. And of course, the reason that is a billion developers is because in Web3, everybody has ownership. Everybody has creative ownership too. So it's not just like Web2 where you're a consumer and nobody really develops things. It's actually totally different in Web3 so that you can just be a normal person. And if you know a little bit about Web3, you can actually start to develop and create on your own in a very, very meaningful way.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like that sentiment there. I'm glad we met. Just for viewers that are listening, I'm glad we met at Polkadot Decoded. That was fun last year. And I was just wondering, what's your story? Are you devs yourself, or what inspired sort of the shift away from maybe a more traditional career to founding EasyA?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can go first, and then I guess Dom can give his story. First got into Bitcoin through mining in about 2013, so actually almost 11 years ago. And this was through some of the technical experience that I'd had. Did a huge amount of coding, so learned at a very young age. And then actually at university, I read law. So that was my foray into something that was slightly different. At university, Dom and I launched 2 marketplace startups. And then after exiting those, after university, we then actually moved out to New York. So I was an attorney. And then after that came and found EasyA. So I guess my journey into Web3 has been sort of through, before it was really called Web3, through more just like the crypto stuff that was happening, the decentralization, all those community efforts, which was just fascinating. Then took a small break into, I guess, the more regulated world, or maybe more traditional TradFi/trad law path. But yeah, I did my undergrad at Cambridge over here in the UK. So after that, then moved out to the States. And yeah, I guess Dom actually, we're both brothers. So we have a shared story up until university, but Dom went to the US afterwards.
Yeah,
nice.
Like Phil mentioned, we've been in blockchain for a while now. And yeah, just, seeing it evolve and see sort of, people go from hobbyists to actually professional developers, and now, starting to really build impactful dApps on chain has been really exciting. But yeah, I guess, for university, I did my undergrad actually in the US at the University of Pennsylvania, where I studied finance at Wharton as an undergrad, and then went to go work for Goldman Sachs and Blackstone afterwards. So very TradFi background. But then shortly after, getting a job at Blackstone, was also then recruited by the former Uber founder, Travis Kalanick, to work for his new startup, Cloud Kitchens. So that was also a really exciting time, kind of, bridge the gap between working in a big, private equity firm where everything is very well oiled, and actually showed me what it's like to be at a startup. After sort of making that switch from Blackstone to Cloud Kitchens, thought, why don't we actually start a startup in our space that we really enjoy, which is blockchain. So that's really, I guess, how we kind of got started and how we launched 3 and a bit years ago now.
That's awesome. I didn't know that you guys had a TradFi background, which is funny because I do as well. I worked in M&A, and that's interesting. So we got something in common there.
Yeah.
So we all ended up in crypto at the moment. I'm just curious. What have you guys been up to most recently? I know you guys do hackathons. I know you have the app. Can you tell us just a bit more about these things?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we can start off with the app. So for anybody who doesn't know about EasyA, you can think of it really being like Duolingo, but for Web3. So it's a mobile app, and I can actually screen share it probably in a second to show people what we've been up to in the Polkadot ecosystem. But essentially,
Sweet.
EasyA is a mobile app that allows anybody at the push of a few buttons to start learning about Web3. So just like Duolingo makes language learning extremely easy, we make it very easy to learn the language of blockchains, and in particular, also to learn how they work. So anywhere from, of course, Polkadot as a very much a layer 0 to the parachains themselves, like Astar, Moonbeam, and then beyond as well. So beyond the Polkadot ecosystem through to other top L1s and L2s, anywhere from the Suis of the world to the Solanas of the world, even to layers like Immutable X, which allow people to build very, very cool games on top. So you can think of it basically as being an app that allows anybody to learn about Web3.
Yeah, and I mean, the app's definitely one side. The hackathons are another big side as well of what we do. So actually, getting all of these learners who have done challenges in the app to a place either in London, the US. Often we do hackathons at Harvard, really good academic institutions, and seeing them actually build for a couple of days, typically over a weekend, 36, 48 hours, seeing what they can build in real life is also really important to that journey. So obviously, capturing their attention, like we did with our recent Polkadot challenges, where almost 45,000 builders now have actually completed those, and then getting a couple of hundred to actually attend IRL. So these are hackathons where people are given a prompt and they can actually build something on chain, on Polkadot, for example, or on one of the other partners that we work with, and then ultimately pitch their idea at the end of those 36 to 48 hours and actually get funding, raise grants from the ecosystems that they're built on, and really actually continue to build well beyond that particular weekend of the hackathon. So it's a really cool experience for devs to be able to learn through the app and then actually show up to one of our IRL events. Really excited to release our roster of events for 2024 shortly.
Sweet. So basically you complement e-learning through the app with in real life learning, so to say, with the hackathons. Right. And actually, I was wondering, what's the most unexpected lesson perhaps you have learned from a hackathon?
I think I can go off with my first lesson. I think one of the things that we were really surprised and consistently surprised at is actually, where people start at the hackathon is not necessarily what determines where they end up afterwards. And so the single biggest actually indicator for us of whether they're able to build a really, really successful project. So, those projects that raised from A16Z last year, the ones that went through YC, the ones who raised from Polygon Labs, these companies are now valued at over $50 million within the space of just a very, very short year. And I think the single biggest indicator of success is actually the raw talent that comes in at the top. So they could come to a hackathon having literally just never even heard about this particular blockchain, or having maybe done just the EasyA app. But as long as they are really, really smart, very, very driven, that has been one of the crucial things that allows them to continue. Sometimes we've had teams who know a lot about the blockchain beforehand, and maybe they do they can actually excel in producing a very cool project that's very technically advanced. But I think that actually what seems to be the most successful teams, what they do is they actually continue to build afterwards, and they learn after the hackathon as well. So I would say that that's one of the key things that I was surprised at. You might often think, okay, the best hackathon team is the one that knows the most at the beginning and produces the most refined product. but actually sometimes it's the ones that have this raw kernel of something very, very interesting that actually becomes the one that is very successful at the end. But that's what I found personally. I mean, Dom might have his own personal lesson from them too.
Yeah, what about you, Dom?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're also always surprised by, kind of building on Phil's last point, is the amount of things that someone can actually build and the amount of progress someone can actually make in a hackathon. So we've had people come in, they've learned about the particular blockchain. For example, at our recent Polkadot hackathon, we had people come in who learned about Polkadot through the app, completed all the modules, learned about the parachains, and then when they actually showed up to our hackathon at Harvard or in London, over the course of last summer, they were actually able to build a fully functioning prototype of an actual dApp that they were able to demo. They were actually able to let users in the audience actually play around with, download. So that was really cool to see that. And obviously, that's something that we never really expect to see. But whenever we see it, and we see it quite often, we're really blown away by the progress that they've made. And obviously, that's a great springboard of which to raise funding, raise grants, and then actually continue building well beyond the hackathon. And we have a lot of teams who are now still building, still raising more grants, still getting more funding, even going on to raise seed rounds, Series A rounds based on the hackathon project. So yeah, really cool stuff.
That's great. That's great. I mean, a thriving developer ecosystem is so important for this industry. So it's really nice to see that you guys are really making an impact there. In terms of what does a hackathon look like? Like you mentioned, they develop dApps then and stuff, but like, what does it look like? Do you suggest topics? Do you suggest explicit projects that they work on over those 48 hours, or do they prepare stuff in advance? Like, how does it go?
That's a great question, and EasyA hackathons are very unique in that respect. So typically, an EasyA hackathon actually begins right in the EasyA app. So maybe this is a good point for me to actually show you what that looks like. If I go ahead and hopefully you'll be able to see this, which is the EasyA app. I've got it up on my phone right here. And this is, for example, Polkadot. So Polkadot, we have 49 challenges. We've had a ton of builders actually come in. I think we're looking at about almost 45,000 builders on the Polkadot challenges right now. And that is where developers can actually come in and experience what they want to see on these different challenges and these different parachain ecosystems. So they'll start with something like Polkadot. They'll learn about how this whole ecosystem works, what a parachain is, what frameworks you can use. And then they'll go in and they'll have a look at these different parachains. So anywhere from Akala down to Moonbeam, down to Astar, and they'll see exactly how it works. So typically we'll release these challenges about 8 weeks before the actual hackathon. And that gives developers an insanely cool opportunity to actually figure out what's going on. Because a huge problem with hackathons is this inertia, right? You come on Saturday, if it's a weekend hackathon, and you spend half of the time actually figuring out, do I want to build on Moonbeam? Do I want to build on Astar? What even is the difference between them? And so the EasyA app is that gateway to Web3 where developers can actually come in and they can start learning about it before the actual hackathon itself in a very fun way. So they can go all the way from knowing nothing about it to actually launching their own cross-chain dApp. And we have these full smart contract deployments where developers are able to literally at the push of a button actually deploy a smart contract and then hopefully get to that bottom where they can see this glowing green certificate of success in the 100% completion at the bottom. So I guess that's the app component. And then for the hackathon, typically it is a weekend. So developers will come primed and ready to go on a Saturday morning. And then they'll have workshops from industry leaders. So for example, the Polkadot hackathons that we had last summer, we had developers from Moonbeam, Astar, Gear Network, a number of others as well. And really they were teaching developers and connecting with them and showing them what they can actually do in this ecosystem. So it's a mixture of actually helping them to learn about Polkadot, but actually one of the key things is actually building up that community. So, as you said earlier, it's about that community and allowing people to form those connections, just like we connected at Polkadot Decoded. And now we're speaking again now. If we can bring people together, then it's so valuable. We have the app where of course, the learning is important. That can be done remotely. But at the end of the day, the hackathon is about allowing people to connect in person and then also getting that grant funding to take their project to the next level afterwards.
Yeah, and one thing that we're always keen on doing as well is obviously, in order to bring as many developers on board as possible or people who are interested in Web3 as possible to these events, we also host a Shark Tank competition, which is a place for developers or even people who are maybe more marketing or business focused to actually pitch their ideas. And this has been really, really successful and something pretty unique to our hackathons at EasyA, just because it allows people to attend maybe their first hackathon without the pressure of having to know how to code or actually build something technically. And then what we've seen actually is people come along to the next hackathon who maybe won the Shark Tank or even had a good experience with the Shark Tank. And then they actually, in the meantime, learn how to code and win the next hackathon on a technical track. So it's a really great gateway for people to actually get involved in the ecosystem, see what the potential is, read about it, give the ecosystem more exposure to, and then they can actually show up and build a project on chain that's fully functioning at the next hackathon or their third hackathon. So yeah, really cool opportunity for non-devs as well at our hackathons.
That's great. That's what I was just gonna ask you about. What kind of level dev do I have to be to do these courses in your app, for example? I mean, for example, I'm a beginner. Can I just get started there, and then?
Yeah, you can. We were actually chatting with some really, I guess, beginners. Yesterday, they were in our community. They just joined. And they had just previously started by collecting NFTs. And they're like, actually, I want to figure out what is the actual best chain for me to maybe be bullish on or, to be building on, because there's no easy way to do that. So, those guys that we were chatting with yesterday, they just got into Web3 through collecting NFTs, but now they potentially want to launch a project. And we're like, hey, actually, the EasyA app is perfect. But then there are also people who are what I would call Web3 surfers, right? Ecosystem surfers who are looking at different ecosystems they want to build on. And, it's very, very cool in the EasyA app. You can come in and you can actually surf between them, swipe between different blockchains. I'll show you what that looks like actually right now. You can come in and you can have a look and be like, okay, actually, maybe I want to learn about stacks. I want to learn about how I can build on Bitcoin. Maybe Sui, one of the newer L1s, or maybe Immutable because I want to build a game, or maybe Solana because there's a lot of hype around it and I'm hearing a lot. So I want to check it out. Yeah. So it's really geared towards any experience level. Of course, if you are very, very experienced, then some of it might make more sense and some of it might be actually even more advanced for you, because you can actually learn how to develop your own smart contracts. For example, for Solana, you can learn about how to use Rust and Anchor, and in Polkadot as well, you can show people how to use Substrate. So that might make more sense to you. If you're just beginning, maybe it'll make sense and click at a later date. You can also revise the content afterwards. But we've really geared it to be as accessible as possible. And to be honest, for us, we view ourselves as being this gateway so that we inspire developers about the potential of what they can do. And I guess it ties onto our earlier point about, one of the things that we were surprised at early on, which is that it doesn't necessarily matter how much somebody knows initially, as long as we inspire them as to what they can build, then that's the important thing. And we see that they continue to build afterwards, and then they'll eventually go down the rabbit hole and learn. And to be honest, looking back on my life and what I learned at school, getting involved in Bitcoin, then afterwards reading law at Cambridge, and then afterwards becoming an attorney, it was, a lot of the stuff that I learned was pretty much self-taught. And there was never really, this sort of, beating slave driver behind me sort of saying, you got to learn this, you got to learn that. I think, at least where I had the most success was actually when I was self-driven. And there was somebody who didn't necessarily teach me, it was a professor who inspired me to go ahead and learn more and really just go down that rabbit hole. And I think in Web3, we've seen that with pretty much everybody who joins. They talk about going down the Web3 rabbit hole rather than actually having somebody who's a physical professor or, going through some sort of very, very structured program to get in.
Yeah, that's interesting. Two things. You mentioned structure. That's what I was wondering, how your approach to teaching about blockchain differs from other things you've seen in the market, but perhaps also just conventional methods. And the other thing was, do you notice any cross-pollination, like you said? I can do the Solana course and then maybe I'm interested in Polkadot. Have you seen that happen a lot, between ecosystems?
Yeah, no, I could definitely touch on the first, and then Dom can touch on the cross-pollination. I think, from what we've seen about the structure of the course, we always start with the story. And so for a really great example of this is the Sui story. Sui is one of the newer L1s that we launched, and it's really about the story behind the founders. Started off as this incredible project at Facebook. They were going to integrate, Libra, DM into WhatsApp, and before you know it, 1 billion people were going to have access to Web3 and be able to send transfer value, have access to stable coins or stable currency at the push of a few buttons, and about how it all fell apart for Facebook, and then eventually resulted in these 2 really cool projects of course, Sui and Aptos, which then came out. And likewise for Polkadot, it's about unraveling the problems that Gavin Wood saw with the existing Ethereum ecosystem, about his solution to it, and about the progress it's made so far. And so for us, it's really been about inspiring developers, teaching them that story. And then the structure, it does follow, there are some things that we found just work. Apart from the story being very fluid and of course differs between blockchains, is getting the developers hooked on a story first and then showing them very practically what they can actually do with it. So for each one of our challenges, we have a very, very concrete project that they can work on. And by the end, they have something that they can fork, actually start to build on in their own GitHub repositories, rather than it being sort of like build Hello World. Like, I've personally never been excited about Hello World. I don't think many people are. And so it's really, rather than getting them to learn about how to say Hello World or print that out on the blockchain, it's actually getting them to build something like a game, or actually launch some sort of voting app that we have for Solana, where you can actually launch something concrete. And likewise for Moonbeam, we have very, very specific projects that people have been able to work on. But yeah, I mean, there's also a ton of cross-pollination. Obviously, we're talking about Polkadot, but we've also talked about Solana at the same time. And so yeah, Dom can probably talk about more of the cross-pollination that we've seen as well between different blockchains.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, one of the beauties of the EasyA app is that it's a place where you can go, you can learn about a particular blockchain. So maybe you come for Polkadot, you come for Solana, come for Sui, any one of the amazing partners we work with. And then you're actually able to see visually all of the other opportunities as well. So for example, if you came for Sui or you came for Solana, you may also want to check out Soroban, which is Stellar's new smart contracts platform, or you may want to check out some of the other offerings we have in the app, and a lot of users do. So a lot of users have reported coming in for Polkadot and saying, oh, I didn't know, I could also build smart contracts on Stellar, for example. And then they've gone to Soroban. And then they've also, maybe gone on to Sui because they've heard about, the team who just left Facebook to found Sui. So there's a lot of reasons why people would actually look at different options in the app. And that's not only great for the learners to give them more opportunities to learn about different things, but also for the chains. Maybe there are chains who are less well known, who maybe just launched, who may be, more or less popular in different geographies. But because they're all inside the app and we switch these up every quarter, people are able to learn about different technologies really easily. And we also encourage everyone to post on Twitter what they're learning. So for example, at the end of every section, there is a prompt that allows them to say, I've just been learning about Polkadot. These are a couple of things I learned. And then obviously that creates a viral flywheel on social media where people can see, okay, this is what this person's learned. Maybe I'll go check it out as well. So it's really cool. And we've seen a lot of people who have, maybe only known about one ecosystem or been really advent supporters of one ecosystem actually start to learn about others and, become less maxi maybe on one ecosystem and vice versa. So it's been a really good opportunity for learners to learn about new things, and also obviously for companies and blockchains to get different people learning about them as well.
That's a great idea with the tweet at the end. That's part of my question. Like, how do you get the word out? I assume the response has been quite positive. You said 45,000 devs on the Polkadot course, for example. How do you guys make that happen?
Yeah, it actually really comes back to our background in consumer. So at university, I was at Cambridge, Dom was at UPenn Wharton, and we both launched these, together we launched these 2 marketplace startups. So those are very much geared towards consumers, essentially allowing, for anybody who's interested in the story, essentially these 2 marketplace startups were built around lending and borrowing, bartering, and we really found lots of different viral hooks that we were able to hook into to get people sharing them amongst college students. So when we launched EasyA, we used a lot of the same playbook. So we launched actually at the blockchain clubs at these universities. Today we partner with over 300 of the world's best blockchain clubs, from like Harvard Blockchain to MIT Bitcoin Club to Cambridge Blockchain, Oxford Blockchain, UCL Blockchain, pretty much you name it. And it was really by leveraging some of those cool things that we'd learned. So starting with very, very top universities and then going through them, allowing those case studies to be built up. And so all of this built together then created this really, really virtuous flywheel of people sharing about it, talking about the case studies, talking about different success stories that they've seen come out. So, for example, last year, we had teams who were funded by A16Z. A team very recently got funded by A16Z who dropped out of Harvard. And of course, that sort of story just spreads via word of mouth. And actually, in order to build it up initially, again, coming back to the consumer side, we did a huge amount of Web2 social media. So, of course, a lot of people are on Twitter, but I'd say that is already sort of a captured market or a captive market for the Web3 crowd. And if we really wanted to expand beyond, what are we up to now? Like 20,000 Web3 developers. If we wanted to expand beyond that, we knew we had to go to Web2. And where is everybody hanging out? Well, they're on traditional social media. They're on TikTok. They're on Instagram. They're looking at a ton of Web2 coding apps and programs that are out there. So we actually went very, very big on Instagram and TikTok. We have 420,000 followers on TikTok. We have 318,000 on Instagram. So very big followings there. And it's just about making content that actually appeals to people and shows them why they would want to learn about it. So, for example, a lot of the content that we'll do on TikTok or Instagram will be about actually, how do I learn how to develop in Web3, or how do I actually get cool opportunities? And it turns out that a lot of the very high paying opportunities are actually in Web3 because it's a skill set that's so high in demand. And so the EasyA app is really the gateway for those people. When they're looking at a video like that, they're like, oh, okay, I'm hooked, right? I'm interested in learning more about how I can get a really great salary like that, or I'm interested in how I can actually build something that's so transformative for people. And then they come into the EasyA app as being that starting point for them. So, a couple of different really cool things, leveraging social media very well, and at the same time, creating those case studies at the bottom of the funnel to actually get more and more people and build that whole flywheel. So, today we've been growing faster than ever, and it's because we finally got to the stage where we not only have that top of funnel through social media, but we also have bottom of funnel where we have those amazing success stories coming out, and it all just starts to feed back in throughout the EasyA ecosystem.
Right. I had no idea you were that big on Insta and TikTok.
You got to follow us. Yeah, actually, you got to repost this on TikTok, and we'll repost it on there too.
Yeah, for sure. I got to check it out. That sounds super interesting. So what was the actual start like? How did you actually start out? You mentioned the blockchain associations at those universities. Did you do in-person courses with them, or did you launch the app and cooperated with them somehow? What did that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we first started working with those blockchain clubs, we actually started working with them on some of the hackathons that we were doing. And so I think, one of the first ones we hosted actually in London. We invited these blockchain clubs. It was actually a much smaller hackathon, very intimate, but everybody had an amazing experience. And so these people went back to their blockchain clubs. They were like, hey, you know what? This is really cool. This blockchain space, look at what we did over summer. Look at not just obviously the prize money that we won, which was fantastic, but look at more importantly, the projects that we built and the potential that's out there. Then they started talking about it with their friends. Next hackathon, we saw double the number of people come. And, just very quickly started doubling and doubling and doubling. And of course, then we had to introduce the wait list and sort of invite only for the hackathons. And, just allowing people to apply in advance. It really started with, a couple of really, really enthusiastic early adopters who then spread the word to their friends and eventually got more and more of it.
What's the one thing? I mean, there's things we love about crypto, but there's also things we're not that happy about, right? I mean, that's how you improve, right? You identify problems and you work on them. So what's the one thing that's bothering you the most with crypto and Web3 at the moment? And what's the one thing you love most?
I can go first. For me, 100% hands down is just how difficult it is still to build on blockchains. I think that we've made so much headway in terms of the abstractions, in terms of the libraries that are now out, but it still is so hard. And we see this pain firsthand at every hackathon. It's why we work so hard on the EasyA app to actually try and make it easy, but it's still way too hard for the average developer to get in. If we're looking at people who are already in Web3, they're prepared to put up with a lot. And so it's that, mentally they are prepared. But if you look at people who are coming in from Web2, they're just like, wait, so why can't I just press a few buttons and start storing something as simple as data, right? Why is it so expensive? Why do I need to make all these optimizations? And why is it also so unsafe, right? Why do I need to, if I'm coding in Solidity, why do I have all these, very, very basic things that could lead to huge exploits? And why do I need to use all of these different tools to check that actually my code is running correctly? In Web 2, you sort of can add tests as a sort of afterthought. But in Web 3, it's sort of like, you need to write that from the very, very beginning. And so something that, to be honest, we've been thinking about very hard is how we actually make that experience a lot better for developers. It's something we're working very hard on. And that, to be honest, is one of the things that I'm also happiest about and most excited about, because it's this huge opportunity. I know that if we've already been able to make such big headway and get so many actually end users involved in Web3 with the current user experience and with the current small number of developers, I'm very optimistic that actually if we can make that developer experience much easier and make it as simple as using AWS or Google Cloud, that we will have the biggest Cambrian explosion of developer activity in Web3 that we've ever seen before. And, Web3 today is small. When this happens, it's going to be bigger than ever. So there's a lot to be very, very optimistic about, a lot to look forward to. And so that's, I guess, my 2 cents. And I know that Dom feels the same, but he can probably add it as well himself.
Yeah, and I think, not only is it hard to build, but I think, one of the pain points as well is explaining to developers or prospective developers what the actual use case is of Web3 and showing them, why they would want to build in Web3. Why would they actually want to take their Web2 idea and build it on chain, for example, and explaining to them the host of benefits. Because I think, a lot of people, maybe have seen Web3, they see it sort of from an external perspective as a Web2 dev, and they maybe think there aren't really any use cases. Web2 is a much easier, more familiar way to build my idea. Why would I actually port it over or actually start something new that's decentralized and on-chain? So I think really conveying to them, what the potential benefits are, and that's one of the things that we do with EasyA and through our challenges is just making it really accessible for people to get started, showing them right up front, what the benefits are, why they should consider building their next app as a decentralized model, and actually showing them, this is what you can build. So really giving them inspiration as well and showing them use cases, showing them potential projects as well that they could be building. I think that's, what also makes the space exciting is that there are still so many unexplored opportunities, so many unexplored use cases, so many ideas that can still be built out. But I think, the first step is definitely making it more accessible, making it easier to build, get started in the space, and removing some of the barriers to entry, which just make it really hard to get started.
Yeah. On that note, you got great insights into that. What can blockchain ecosystems sort of do better to onboard developers? Obviously it's an important metric, developer activity, developer count, growth. So what can these blockchain ecosystems, the foundations, whatever, or just the people who are active in those ecosystems, what can they do better? Is it better docs? Is it just better initiatives, better social media outreach, whatever? What's maybe the one big thing you would highlight most, and also other points that you think are important?
I think personally, one of the biggest things is, apart from obviously, across the board, just making things simpler and easier to use, improving the UX, is to actually try and make it intuitive for users and developers as well. People have this, they're very resistant to change. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you can cotton onto it, it's a very, very powerful force. But you can't really expect people to learn things from new every single time. Edeni, one of the co-founders of Sui, talks about it. You need to give users an experience that is familiar to them. And we see this across the board as well. You see it with, the way that Web2 companies typically operate, right? Snapchat stories comes out, Instagram stories, Instagram now has stories, and, TikTok now has stories too. TikTok has Reels or had Reels in its own form, right? And then Instagram copied it and made Reels. And we see the same thing with Snapchat Spotlight. So all of these different apps, they have very, very similar UXs. And I think that what we want to see more of is, different blockchains actually converging on a very similar experience, or at least taking one that actually already works for developers. So most developers are Web2 developers. If you could just make it as simple as or as easy as using, for example, the same editor that you always use, right? Or even actually getting set up. Maybe you have some guardrails on initially, right? So if you make an experience that's similar to AWS or Google Cloud, then that means that developers can get involved more easily. And even if it does start out more centralized, maybe you can start to make it more decentralized afterwards, and developers can eventually start to pick it apart. And Google has done an amazing job, phenomenal job, with abstractions like Firebase, which allows you to get set up with user authentication, databases, all extremely simply. You just say, basically, I need a database, right? And Google gives it to you. And eventually, if you need more granularity, you can then dive down into all of the intricacies of what Google Cloud offers. You can provision your own virtual machines. You can provision all this Kubernetes stuff that people rave about, all these microservices. But at the end of the day, the entry point and the way that they get you in is by making it dead simple. And I think that that's the biggest thing that these blockchains need to solve. It's, obviously we love buzzwords like decentralization. We want everything to be super decentralized. But at the end of the day, maybe it doesn't need to start off like that. And I think that we are seeing more and more success from blockchains who are thinking about things on a more abstracted level, just abstracting away, being very, very opinionated about things, and then letting developers, once they need that extra granularity, actually to then start going into it rather than having to build everything from scratch.
So like simple and intuitive tooling and documentation, so to say, can go a long way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think as well, like not being afraid to actually not necessarily do more of the same, but just stick to something which is familiar to developers. I talk about our consumer experience, and one of the stories that I always love is the original story of TikTok. So TikTok, or rather Musical.ly, before it then became TikTok in the US, the founder originally built it as an edtech platform. So he thought, actually, if we can make video content that's very, very interesting, fascinating to watch, people will start doing it. And what he saw is actually people really just wanted to make videos and make fun dancing videos, but make it very easy for them to make them. So actually had to make it easy to film a video and add a soundtrack on the back of that. And as soon as he did that, it went totally viral, right? And so you can debate about the merits of building an edtech platform versus something that allows people to post singing and dancing videos, which is more valuable. But actually, if you look at TikTok today, a lot of people learn through it, right? And so we were actually part of, about 2 years ago, a big transformation that TikTok went under. We created a huge amount of educational content as part of Learn on TikTok. And so TikTok reached out to us and they're like, hey, start posting, this is something that's big that's happening. And we were part of that early wave of creators who are actually on creating this educational content. And now you look at TikTok, and educational content is actually some of the highest performing content out there. The singing and dancing version of TikTok is obviously still there, but it's actually a much smaller proportion of content. And so I think that provides a very nice lesson for some of what people are doing, not just on the consumer side, but of course in Web3, where you can start off with maybe just giving developers what they want initially. And then, once they're hooked, and once you make this, once you onboard all these developers, you can then start giving them what they want, maybe honey the cup initially, before there's not necessarily bitter medicine of blockchain that you need to get them used to, but it's more like, get them on something that's easy first, and then actually make it harder, or not make it harder, but allow them to experience the harder stuff later on.
Right. Or maybe you can sing and dance and talk about Solana. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you start that, if you change the Teach Me DeFi podcast into a rapping podcast, I'll definitely be one of the first people to sign up.
Oh God! So you'll be the only one signed up then, I think. After all,
it'll have to be auto-tuned. I can't rap.
Sweet. We kind of talked about this already, but I was wondering to what extent interest and participation in your courses and hackathons could be like a leading indicator for growing or shrinking crypto industry, or even a specific blockchain, or like a sub-segment of applications. Have you noticed that to be the case, and like any current trends that stuck out to you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one of the really interesting things that we never really expected was that a lot of DevRel folks from different teams, a lot of people who are really involved in the developer side, actually wanted to come into the EasyA app to see how many people were learning about different protocols and different blockchains, actually. So, obviously right now, I think Solana, Polkadot are currently leading the way in terms of the most popular challenges we have. But it's really interesting for maybe people from other teams to actually come in and see, okay, why are they leading? What makes them different? And even actually just to learn about some of the different technology too. Because maybe if you're a developer in the Polkadot ecosystem, you want to see what Solana's doing to attract developers, and you want to maybe apply some of that stuff to what you're doing currently. So yeah, it's been really interesting to see people kind of look at the challenges in other ways as opposed to just purely from a learning perspective, but also, yeah, just to see engagement. We have a couple of really cool releases actually coming out where we're going to be ranking some of the chains as well. And I think, yeah, just very similar to how people look at the Electric Capital report, people are going to start looking very closely at challenges within the EasyA app and actually seeing which ones are the most popular and actually returning to the leaderboard that we're going to launch for the different chains to see exactly, like you said, which chains have the most eyeballs on them and therefore the most developers. And I think, yeah, developer attention is a great indicator of value that the chain is going to generate over a longer term, because they're really the lifeblood of the chains. It's like having an app store and then having a bunch of apps on top. If there are no apps, people aren't going to go, and vice versa. So yeah, really cool to see exactly that.
That's super interesting. And like an actual additional indicator sort of like at the beginning of the funnel, so to say, in terms of developer interest, for example, like how many do engage in what courses on EasyA? And what role do you see EasyA playing in this journey, perhaps, of developers? Like, when do they come to you? Is it at the very beginning? Is it after they've already had some experience developing on blockchains? And what do they end up doing after being part of your courses and hackathons? You kind of mentioned already that some raised substantial amounts of money and are creating projects, but yeah, I'd just love to hear more about that.
Yeah, we really see ourselves as being that full funnel for developers. We obviously started off with a lot of these hackathons, realized that actually a lot needs to happen before the hackathon, which is why we really tripled down, quadrupled down on what we were doing in the EasyA app to make that process as streamlined and efficient as possible for developers. And really, we've also been working on the bottom of the funnel, so making sure that projects aren't just coming to the hackathons, but able to stay sticky within an ecosystem. So, one of the awesome teams actually that came out of one of our Polkadot hackathons this summer called Team Flyblock, absolutely insanely talented team, composed of Harvard PhDs, also ex-CTO of Napster, and other head of product at like Algorand, super smart guys. And a lot of what we've been trying to do is help them actually get connected up in the ecosystem, make sure that they're speaking to the right people. That is obviously very much led by us as the founders right now, but it's something that we're working on actually expanding out later on. So I think we see all of these pockets of where the problems arise in developers' journeys. We keep a very very close eye on them, and then we try and actually help to solve those. So very much, of course, we have a very very clear vision, but we see that there are different pockets of areas that we need to work on. The bottom of funnel is a big one, but at the same time, to be honest, I think that comes back to what we were saying earlier about how it's just about getting more people inspired about Web3, getting those super smart and talented people into it. And most people just still don't know anything about like the implications that blockchain have, the potential, what they can use it for. And that's really what we need to do. It's get this amazing pool of talent of people all around the world and show them what they can build on blockchain. And that's still going to be a huge focus for us. But at the same time as making it easy for them once they are involved, and also showing them what the pathway is when they are actually in. Duolingo is in one way a great example of how an amazing top of funnel was built for people to learn about languages. Was listening to what Louis von Ahn, their founder, was saying about, what happens after Duolingo. It's very much there to get people inspired, but it doesn't necessarily take you towards fluency, right? We want to be there and actually go one step further so that we can inspire people, but also get them fluent in the blockchain and actually help them to become completely native in the actual language or the ecosystem of that blockchain.
So many questions now. Networking, didn't think about networking, to be honest. Obviously, that is some big part of it, and an aspect where you can support people that come to your hackathons. One question is like, what manpower do you need for this? Like to offer this kind of support? How are you structured?
Yeah, right now we have a team of 15, and so really that's mostly across obviously things like operations and also engineering. So we do a lot of engineering to actually build out the EasyA app, design. If you have a look, or anybody who's listening has a look at the EasyA app, you'll see it. We also won App of the Day for it, so a huge amount that goes into that. But we are expanding as well. So if anybody is listening to this and finds what we're working on very, very interesting or exciting, definitely reach out to Dom or me on Twitter, and we'd love to hear on you too, because we are expanding. This is a big mission, bringing the next billion developers into Web3. We're not going to be able to do it with just us. So we need the whole community. And to be honest, the community has been our most valuable asset. I know Solana team talk about the community as being their most valuable and most scalable resource too, rather than it being the centralized team. And so we lean very heavily, of course, on our MVPs within our community, as we call them. I think Dom actually came up with the name, the EasyA Gigabrains, and getting them to actually share more and help us more out in the community as well. So we have a buzzing network of ambassadors who actually help us, share the word about EasyA, but not just EasyA. Of course, EasyA is just the means to an end to get them to share the mission and the story behind Web3 to the world.
Well, two people should be enough, Phil. You take 500,000, Dom takes 500,000, should be fine. You can't be slacking off now. Come on.
Exactly. And 500 million to get to $1 billion too.
Sorry, 500 million. Yeah, you're right. You mentioned that you kind of want to go, like Duolingo would scratch the surface a little bit and not go maybe more in depth. That's what I was wondering. I mean, there could be critics who say that, gamification of learning can by design only scratch the surface and not cover like the complexity and depth of certain topics. And with blockchain technology, obviously, there can be a lot of depth and intricacies. So how are you sort of tackling this?
I thought about it a lot, and in particular, I thought about the way that Duolingo has tackled it. And I was wondering, what was Vonan talking about when he mentioned, Duolingo is not really there to get people to be totally fluent in a language. And I think, really, we share a very, very similar origin story in that sense. The EasyA app is there to inspire developers. I think we are, still just scratching the surface in terms of the number of people who know about it. I think there's ultimately an inherent trade-off between making something very, very advanced and in-depth versus making it something which inspires people. I think a lot of people are happy, for example, to watch a 15-second video on TikTok, way more happy to watch that than a YouTube video, which is, 10 minutes long, versus people who are happy to watch like a 10-hour documentary or docu-series on something. And so I think we're still at this stage in Web3 where we don't have enough people. We're not even scratching the surface for people who are interested in Web3. And we need to absolutely double down on that and triple down on actually getting more people excited about it. But at the same time, we do go one step further, or a couple of steps further than Duolingo, in that we do have these IRL hackathons, which are extremely, extremely important. It's almost like having a sort of Duolingo meetup on steroids, every couple of weeks. Where people are able to come, they're able to get what they've learned in the EasyA app and put it into practice, actually use it in the real world and actually raise funding afterwards. So, that's really, I guess, our solution to that problem of getting people to be fluent. Typically, we actually see that the hackathons are where people really take their projects to the next level. And then what happens after the hackathon is they start to become fluent because they start conversing with people who are already integrated into the blockchain ecosystems. They start to form those bonds. And yeah, hopefully you'll be able to come, or people listening are able to come to the next one and see what we're really talking about.
For sure. We put the links in the show notes as well so people can get involved easily. We've seen a lot of hacks in crypto, especially like bridges, custodial bridges, multi-sigs, controlling funds and all that. There's been loads and loads of hacks, which it has been hurting the industry, the way it's perceived from the outside and all that. How do you sort of make sure to also teach security best practices to these developers who will soon be developing these applications that might have a lot of users who don't know better?
Yeah, on the technical level, we really focus on the frameworks and making sure that actually what they're learning about is safe by default. So there are, I guess, we can split it up into two main areas. One is the frameworks. So, for example, when we are getting people to learn about things in Polkadot, for example, we try to get them to use the frameworks that are existing out there rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. It's part of our philosophy. It not only helps to make the learning experience a lot more streamlined, a lot faster, but of course it promotes security and best practices. With Solana, we get people to learn about frameworks like Anchor, which make it much more streamlined, much faster. Of course, with Sui, we focused very much on Sui Move, which I know there's been a lot of discussion about bringing it to Polkadot too. Yeah. And so languages like that actually make it so that you can actually develop, and it's a lot safer. right? You've got all this type safety, and it's very, very different to something like Solidity and even actually Rust in terms of the safety. I know Sam Blackshear, one of the co-founders of SUI, posted a very nice tweet about the difference in the number of lines between if you were to use just pure old Rust to achieve the same result as something like SUI Move. Comparing like Solana to SUI. Of course, he's a little bit biased having been, the creator of it, but you can see what the difference is. And, having used it myself, you can see a real difference. But the second bit is actually just to give people those pre-built frameworks in the sense of project as well. So at the end of every EasyA challenge, developers will typically have a project that has been pre-built for them that they can then fork and build on top of. So I think it's a mixture of obviously using those libraries/frameworks at the beginning, and then second of all, also giving them something that they can build on top of rather than having to rewrite everything from scratch and reinvent the wheel.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, security kind of comes from education ultimately. The more you know about the blockchains, the more you know about connecting your wallets, the more you know about different projects, you kind of, become more secure, I guess. So, yeah, I think, everything that we really preach and everything that we actually drive towards is really actually helping users become more safe online and more safe, especially on the Web3 internet.
Yeah. It's like that picture when it says like, just bought my new ledger and you can see the seed words in the background. I like that one.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
So what's next for you guys? What are you working on? What's next? And also, what are you excited about where the crypto industry is going at the moment?
Yeah, on my side, I can start. Definitely, in the short term, we're excited about actually building on the success that we had with Polkadot last year. We had those amazing hackathons, teams who are raising, who have got grant funding, and a huge number more of people who've actually just scratched the surface with Polkadot. Obviously, the almost 45,000 builders who started learning about Polkadot through the EasyA app. We want to get them further down the funnel, get them to come along to more of these hackathons. And so we're actually discussing with a lot of the other ecosystem teams we worked with in the Polkadot community last year and new ones as well who reached out after seeing what we did last year to actually see, where can we have the most impact? What do we need to do for developers? And we're currently, still discussing with them, and hopefully we'll be doing a lot more in the Polkadot ecosystem soon. Beyond just that as well, we do want to build on what we just talked about with actually making the developer experience a lot easier. So we have some very, very exciting plans for how we're actually going to allow people to get into these ecosystems much more easily, leveraging the EasyA app and what we've built so far, and adding some very, very nifty features so that developers can actually come into it and build not just safe apps, but also build very quickly on top of these blockchains without really needing to go through all of the hassle that they currently go through, really inching towards that Web2 developer experience that, in some ways Web 2 sounds like it's a step back, but in many ways actually Web 2 is a step forwards in terms of developer experience.
Right. What do you think, Dom? Anything to add?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, heading into 2024, or actually rather in 2024 already, I think one of the big things that we're excited about as well is also doing more IRL events. So really doing more developer activations, hackathons all across the world. We have an amazing hackathon roster that we're going to be dropping soon on our Twitter. But essentially we'll be going from, Singapore to New York to Austin to, obviously London, and a bunch of different world-class cities, and really educating developers in those different hubs about the different partners that we're working with and getting them to pitch their ideas. And hopefully at the end of 2024, we'll also be hosting a global demo day, which is a bit of alpha as well for those who are tuning in. But essentially, we're going to be getting the best hackathon projects all together at a special location, and we're going to be letting them pitch in front of VCs. So that's going to be a really cool way to end off the year and actually see those projects get taken to the next level, even beyond what they've been doing with the grants that they've already won from the hackathon. So that's going to be really cool to see. But yeah, 2024 is going to be an epic year that we've probably never seen anything like it before.
Sweet, that's awesome. What better way to start the year with such excitement
and
plans? Yeah, that's awesome. Just to wrap it all up, how can people get involved? Where would you point them?
Yeah, best way is definitely checking out our Twitter. So our Twitter, I'm sure we can obviously leave it and we can comment as well ourselves. So our Twitter is where we post a lot of what's coming out. And of course, download the EasyA app. So EasyA app is where you'll find the latest challenges that we drop every couple of weeks on different blockchains, or even same blockchains, but new stuff that's come out. Or of course in Polkadot, new parachains that are coming out and have come out over the past couple of weeks, and are also about the events that we're hosting. So these hackathons that are coming out throughout the year, we have a special events tab where you're able just in one click just to sign up and register. So I'd say definitely a mixture of, drop us a follow on Twitter, and also go ahead and download the EasyA app where you can find everything that we're doing and keep in touch. And of course, if you are excited about what we're building at EasyA, reach out to Dom and me. We're always active on Twitter as well. So just comment on one of our posts or feel free to send us a DM.
Perfect. Well, nice. Thank you guys. That was a great episode. Great chat. Really happy we got to talk about education a bit and hear what you guys are doing there. I think it's super important work, and lovely to see that you're having such an impact. All the best for the rest of the year, and we'll be following you closely here, and just hope to see you soon.
Yeah, and thank you too for having us on. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for hosting. You're doing amazing work with TEACHMEDEFI.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Soheichi.
No worries. Thanks, guys.